Ishwarama's resplendent sun. It's the start of a bright new day. Time to rise, time to shine, Lord divine. Time to lead us along life's way. Awake, Lord of Buddha party. Awake, O Lord, over all mankind. Awake, O Lord of compassion, that the world good fortune may find.
When Swami blesses us, and of course His grace is always there, he points out, though, that as devotees there is a little bit of personal effort that we have to engage in. For example, the rain is grace, but we have to turn the pot right side up in order to collect the water. That photo session we just had, you know, each year we've reported this, that we take the photos to Swami and we show them, and he blesses. And several years ago he blessed the conference and blessed what we were doing here, all of us. And I was thinking just a moment ago that I wanted to say that to Michael Goldstein and to Gloria Goldstein, we really are very, very grateful for their having come. And you say, well, it's their duty, and that's true. But when we got ready to plan this tour, we were thinking about where to go and what cities to do it in. They were very strong on wanting to come to St. Louis. And before that, they had said that they wanted to come to St. Louis. And so with a lot of other considerations, that turned out to be the case. So we thank them for coming, and we're very happy that we had that experience. And the other speaker, who is now in the wings, just about to come up here, has also had a soft spot in his heart for this area. He's a fellow son of the South. He's from Jackson, Tennessee. I came from Jackson, Mississippi. And he's doing many, many things, but you get to know him through a number of channels. I remember going in to see New York one time, and some devotees telling me about I should take a look into the Hard Rock Cafe, and I'd heard a lot about that and seen it in various publications, etc. And they said, well, just go up and tell them that you're a devotee, and even though there are lines all up and down the streets, they'll let you come in and take just a look. And so I did that. I tried it out and went in, and there was this place, which is a great-looking 20th century, 1970s, 1980s vintage bar. Beautiful decor, lots of music, loud music, but a great, vibrant atmosphere. And lots of young people having lots of fun and being very much in the world, ostensibly. And lots of icons, symbols and pictures and photos all around. Photos and gold records and platinum records of the rock stars. And it was a hangout for all kinds of people that were very eminent in their fields. But on one wall was many, many sayings, somewhat reminiscent to the walls of here at some of our halls. Religious icons, religious photos. But in the middle of everything, in the most prominent space, was a bigger than life-size photo of Swami. And it's just, it's great to see that, and I understand it was that photo, or photos like that, were other places. So I began to hear something about this person named Isaac. And eventually I got to meet Isaac at Prasanthi Nilayam. He has the distinction, and I'm sure he's going to tell us about it. He doesn't prepare so much for these things, he just lets it come, but I'm sure he's going to mention all the things Dr. Goldstein said he should mention today, plus plus he'll mention some other things, but he holds the record, and this is good for all of us to remember and keep in mind. And when Swami blesses us, we just have to have patience. Faith and patience is all that we need. We just don't need to worry. We can't stress that enough. And in due time, when the time is really perfect and really right, it will become manifest to us. And in one way, his story is somewhat similar to that, because he went to Prasanthi Nilayam on frequent occasions each year for 15 years, and Swami never spoke to him one time during all that point of time. That's a good lesson for all of us to hear. There are lots of stories about Isaac, but Isaac has lots of stories. So without further ado, Isaac Tigrett.
One second.
Go ahead.
Alan, would you come forward, please? We have to offer you a little bit of things. Just 1 second.
Well, since you have shown your love for us, Isaac, in coming here, we thought we could give you a little symbolic token of our love for you, and it's in the form of flowers, which Swami says is a form of love. So thank you for demonstrating to us the slogan on the wall behind us.
Thanks.
And like Sam, I'm not brave enough to pin that on you.
Well, I just want to thank, first of all, y'all for having me here. It's really you all who've done me a great favor. I came in last night from London, and someone from the organization had put the most fabulous picture of Sai Baba next to my bed, and I'd really forgotten about him for a couple of days. And so it was a great thrill, and it is such a thrill to be among so many devotees. The Sathya Sai, I'm sure that you all feel by coming together, is of course something that we want to keep going when we're not together as well. Yes, it's true. I had in fact, in fact, I'd like to say hello to all the guys out in the tent who are watching by television. I'm sorry it was not a bigger hall. Yeah, all right. Thank you. I know you're there. I'm from Jackson, Tennessee. I had a fantastic life up until the age of about 13. My family founded the town that I come from. They came over, they were lawyers in South Carolina, came over in covered wagons in 1814 and founded the little town of Jackson, Tennessee. Every generation had the major business that employed everybody in the whole town. So I grew up in a very unique situation where I was being given far too much attention from the time I was born. I would walk downtown every Saturday with my nanny, and all the shopkeepers would come out and give me a gift. And I really was raised in a very princely sort of way, strange sort of way. My family had a plantation. I grew up primarily in a world that was 90% black because there were African Americans with me all the time. I think I am influenced heavily by that culture, certainly my sensitivity. Then at the age of 13, with all this glory going on for 13 years, I suddenly had an situation that happened out in Tucson, Arizona, where we had a winter home, and I had a little brother. There was a freak accident that occurred at the wash on a river, and he fell into the river, and more bank gave way, and he was covered up. And I dug him up and pulled him up on the side. My next-door neighbor had run over to the spot, and he had a heart attack from running that far. He was a retired Air Force general. His son came running over to see what was wrong with him, who was about 6 or 7 years old, and went into total hysteria. Then the nanny who had been watching out for us, who knew that we weren't supposed to play at that place, came out and saw her little boy, my brother Hewitt, completely blue, and went into total hysteria. I gave him artificial respiration for about 45 minutes, and then the ambulance came and took the man with the heart attack, my little brother, the little boy, and all of them away. I went back and prayed for several hours alone. I was 13 years old at the time, and prayed for this boy's life. He was dead. A few months after that, my older brother developed schizophrenia and became schizophrenic. And he wouldn't talk to anyone but me, and I spent most weekends going into locked wards and where they had schizophrenics, and literally a lot of my youth was spent over the next year or two in some of the most traumatic situations. Frightens me just to even think about them then. My mother and father never spoke again after the death of my little brother. My mother had had a premonition that something was going to happen, and their relationship completely broke down and was destroyed. Eventually, my mother and father split up, and this is all sort of a period of the next 2 or 3 years after this first event. My older brother then took his life. There was tremendous violence in him, which I witnessed often, along with the insanity. My parents, my father, never forgave himself and decided to self-destruct the family business to punish himself, and did that. And this series of events went on. There was just one trauma after another, after another, after another for a number of years. I was blessed to have an interview with Sai Baba, and occasionally he will turn to his devotees and say, ask a question, any question that you want. So I asked him, he had said, would you like me to answer a question for you? I said, yes, I would like to know why I was born into a family where there was so much violence and tragedy and insanity and death. And he looked at me and smiled and said, Tigrett, to soften your heart. And I can only tell you, because my story isn't in particularly different from many stories that I'm sure all of you could tell. But I can't say enough about what those words meant to me, because what I had thought had been a curse, in fact, I realized the moment he said it had been a blessing. Because it is those combination of experiences that have given me the understanding, the patience, the love, hopefully some integrity. I won't talk too much today. So I beseech you all to understand sort of the bigger picture. Indeed, many of us, in fact most of us I assume, understand that this is not our first birth, that we've had many more and we'll have many more to come. So patience is part of it. I got very upset. The first time I went to see Sai Baba, I had been sort of receiving sort of, I don't know, the things we're not supposed to talk about, messages since I was 13, in fact, since this accident occurred. And one of the things that happened to me was this message came over and over again, By the Secret Life of Plants. I didn't know what it meant. About 4 or 5 weeks later, I pick up a magazine. I'm 24 years old at the time. The Hard Rock has been open a couple of years. I pick up a magazine, and here's an article in the book section about a book all about parapsychology and psychic phenomenon that they were panning, in fact, saying, don't buy it, this stuff is crazy, who can believe in all this? But I picked up the phone and called the authors who lived in, I think, South Carolina, and said, I want to buy the theatrical rights to your book. I want to make a film out of this. And they said, you crazy? Have you read the reviews? We've been panned everywhere. I said, well, I just know it's for me. So I bought the rights. 6 weeks later, it hit the New York Times bestseller list, stayed there for 57 weeks. And the next thing I knew, I was getting calls from Hollywood, from Warner Brothers in particular, that wanted me to come out and talk to them about making a film. I did that. Stevie Wonder actually became my partner, and he wrote and produced music for this documentary on paranormal things called The Secret Life of Plants, which some of you may have seen. And we sent out visiting all the phenomenon on the planet. We went to places like Duke and Johns Hopkins, where there are parapsychology departments. I was always searching, looking. I had known since I was very young, and it just kept going on in my head. There was a master for me. Well, here in the West, there's the master-student relationship is sort of an unknown thing. So there were no sources that I could go to. It was actually a preacher in New York that some of you may have read some of his books, Norman Vincent Peale, who was a friend of my family's, who sort of guided me through this very difficult time. And it was, I guess, in India, in a place called Aurangabad. I'm sitting there. We went to India to visit all the known masters. Sai Baba was not on the list. And I was in this hotel with these chaps, and suddenly in my head, you've come, I've been waiting. And I look up, and there's a magnificent photograph of Sai Baba. I immediately asked the hotel manager, who is that? And they said, well, this is one of our great saints. In fact, the gentleman who owns this hotel chain is a devotee, and that's why this picture is here. I went down to Whitefield at the time, left within just a few hours, very excited because I felt that this was the master that I had been looking for. There was a big crowd there. I think it was a Sunday. There were several thousand people, and I was about 70 pounds ago, I guess, leaning up against the back wall there, and there was a big crowd. Sai came out and moved everybody aside and walked right over to where I was and moved his hand, and of course this ash started pouring from his hands. And that began my road, my journey with him, which has been so incredibly exciting, as it has been, I'm sure, for all of us. I went back about a month or so later to Puttaparthi, and in those days, this is 1974, there was only one line at Darshan in this particular time of the year. When I think of all the torment we go through and wondering which row we're going to get in. And people, he called everybody in the line within a week for an interview, and I got very upset because he skipped over me all the time. And I got very angry. In fact, I was just about cursing him in my room, saying, tomorrow, if you don't see me, that's it. I'm leaving here. You're not the one I was looking for. I came out the next day, and he came out and picked one, then two, and the third, and then he turned back, and he said, you, go. So I thought, well, this is a lot better. I like this. And in those days, you'd sit outside his door, and they would pull one person in at a time. That was the schedule, and you'd scoot up, and he'd call another person in. I was the last guy, and finally he got to me, and the fellow had gone in front and come out, and no one came out to get me. And I waited there for half an hour, 45 minutes. Finally, a chap came out and said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, Sai Baba wants to see me. He said, no, he doesn't. Well, it was pretty fantastic, him preparing me for the next 15 years, because he did not speak to me, look at me, or say a word to me for the next 15 years. That experience prepared me for it, because my ego got to the highest realm it could get, and then he made it very clear that he would see me when he wanted to. Very clear. I had, and some of you may have heard this, I've had some, as all of you, some of you, most of you have had some wonderful experiences. Those experiences, the two most dynamic, I guess, well, actually they all are, I mean, quite frankly, but I was in a car accident in 1975 where a car went over a cliff. I fell asleep in a Porsche Targa. I'm sure all the boys know what a Porsche is, right? And as I crashed through this barrier at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was about a 200-foot cliff there, and the car started spinning. I woke up. I felt a pressure on my shoulders and looked, and there was Sai Baba sitting in the car next to me. The car went over about a dozen times. There was no windshield, no roll bar, no front end, no rear end. Tires were off. I had no seatbelt on, and there wasn't a scratch on me. I got up, and 2 days later was in Puttaparthi to thank him, and of course he ignored me, as his tradition. About 2 years later, I had another death experience in a place called Denver, Colorado. There was a hotel there, and I was in a hotel room. I've had quite a substantial life involving around drugs. Part of what my whole scene, the youth scene that I represented, was very much a drug culture. In fact, from the age of some of these folks in here, I think that they know what I'm talking about. I had an epileptic fit due to an affair I had with something called methaqualone, and I literally swallowed my tongue and choked to death. The spirit came right out of the top of my body, just like you read about or have read about if you read metaphysical books, and I'm looking down at my body. Something said, "Call your master's name and he will help you." I did. Sai appeared in the room, picked me up, put me on this bed, pressed on my chest, and the life force went back inside. I went back to India a week later to thank him, and of course, he didn't want to know about it. Until a year and a half ago, and I don't know if maybe Dr. Goldstein might have been there that time, there were several meetings at Whitefield when we were playing the hospital. There were a number of distinguished doctors and surgeons there, and he got everyone's attention. And he said, "Tigrett, I saved your life 2 times, didn't I?" And in fact, this is now some 15 years later. And it was quite remarkable. And I said, "Yes, Swami, yes, you saved my life 2 times. And he leaned over and whispered in my ear, "And many other times, too." It's an extraordinary experience, Sai Baba. I'll never forget one particular wonderful situation that occurred when a friend of mine named Gary Bells, who's a gentleman from Memphis, Tennessee, called me. He wanted to go down and see Sai Baba. We went down together. He was there for about 2 weeks. And he was very upset one night, going back and forth, pacing up and down the room. He said, "Look, I've been here 2 weeks. Definitely this is a superhuman being. This is a great saint. This is a God-man." He said, "But I cannot comprehend this business of omniscience, being everywhere at once. You know, it's beyond comprehension." I related these 2 stories to him and said, "Look, you know, I've had these 2 experiences, and even though I've had them, a demonstration of such a thing, it's beyond my comprehension to really understand what happened." So don't worry about it, you know, go on to bed. And he did. About 3 o'clock in the morning, he's shaking me violently. He says, "Isaac, you just won't believe it. I've had this visitation from Sai Baba. It was a dream, but it was more than a dream." He said he had my mother and father sitting on one side of me, my children on the other. He materialized a lathe. He started giving me a lecture on enlightenment, and it was just so incredible. You just can't believe it. It was like he was really here. It was the real thing. And I said, "Oh, Gary, that's great. You're going back to sleep." Well, the next day, at Darshan, Sai Baba called the 2 of us in. And he turned to my friend Gary and he said, "Last night, you had a dream about me. Your parents were sitting on one side, your kids on the other. I materialized a lathe." He said, "You got so excited you woke up and told Tigrett." "I know, I was there." Demonstrating his omniscience. It's a thrill. I went for 15 years just to be in his vibration. And of course, we're so spoiled in the West. When you think about all our incredible brothers in India in particular who will travel for 1,000 miles under tremendous difficulty just to be in the vibration of Sathya Sai Baba, and then filled to the brim, turn a day or 2 later and leave, not wishing for an interview, not looking for that sort of attention. I can tell you now, after all these years and what little understanding I have of this great mystery, he treats everyone the same. Absolutely everyone. And it is that vibration that you go for, not for personal attention. I mean, those of us that do get personal attention, I sort of think we probably need more work than anybody else, and that's why he's giving us a little bit more. After some 15 years, one day, Sai Baba came out, and suddenly, the next thing I knew, I was inside having an interview with my master. The first thing he asked me was, "Where is God?" I said, "God is in my heart, Swami." He said, "No." He said, "It's like a fish swimming through water. The water is above the fish, below the fish, around the fish, inside the fish." He said, "You are a fish swimming through God." And it really, again, demonstrates the omniscience. He is the very atmosphere. I mean, to think for 1 second that he is not sitting in that chair is a big mistake. Goldstein can tell you how he lost one of his stones one day. The second question he asked me was one of the most exciting. He said, "How do you get to God?" Well, you know, in the first visit I had to Puttaparthi, I went to the wonderful canteen. I think the upma there is the best in the world. I go there for the food a little bit. And as I was leaving, there was a little wooden sign. I think the canteen is no longer there, and it's in a new incarnation. But a little wooden sign that said, "Love all, serve all." So I thought, how fantastic this is. I have always believed that meetings like this are great. Singing bhajans are great. But it's too limited. As far as I'm concerned, you're in service all the time, no matter what you do. I am and was, I guess, sort of a black sheep of the Sai organization. People said, Sai Baba doesn't approve of rock and roll. Sai Baba doesn't approve of a guy that sells beer and meat and all these other type of things. And I took a lot of abuse from a lot of people in the organization. I never really got too involved in it, but because I knew that he was with me. And I knew it didn't make any difference what I was doing, as long as I was putting his teachings into my work. You know, those 5 principles are all the weapons that you need in this life. When I came out of that first visit to the canteen and the Utma and saw that little sign, "Love all, serve all," I said, "This is beautiful. This is so happening. I'm into this whole music thing." It was the 70s. I said, "I think I'll take that phrase and put it into my business and put it into my work." And it became the motto of the Hard Rock. It appeared probably on 30 million matchbook covers that we gave away, matches and buttons and T-shirts and jackets and millions of things, literally. And the whole feeling to me was, you have too much attention. People are rushing towards you because you're famous or what you're doing is famous, looking for something. Why not reflect back a message if you're in that position? Give them something to take away with them. So it became love all, serve all. The second thing Swami asked me in this interview, and I had grave feelings, am I doing the wrong thing and whatever, and it always came back, no, keep going, keep moving, keep driving. The second question he asked me is, how do you get to God? I'd already missed the first question, so I wasn't about to jump on in there again. And I said nothing. He turned to someone else, and finally turned back to me. He says, how do you get to God? I froze up a little bit, and he said, love all, serve all. I knew then that he had been with me all the way. And I knew that the reason, despite the type of business I was in, that I was now at the Master's feet is because I had practiced those principles in my business. And this whole thing about spirituality and business don't mix, or money and spirituality, or, I think it's nonsense. I mean, I have practiced something every day because I've been so aware of my soul since I was so young. I see God in every person. Sai Baba has said to do this, but I'm in a business where I see thousands of people every day. So I just started practicing doing that. It's like meditation. After a while, that's what you see. I'm not only colorblind, I am body blind, because I do see that in every person. And I think so much that, this is the Kali Yuga. This is the darkest age man has ever been in. You know, we're so drawn to the body, to the mind, to the senses. There's nothing to support God's existence even on the planet in these times. I think our job is, of devotees, is to be in the world, to be beacons of light for Him. I mean, that's one of the great things that he told me about the Hard Rock later when I asked him. He said that was a beacon of light in a sea of darkness. And I can't tell you how exciting it has been to put spirituality and everyday living together. It's so very important. I was just talking to a man who's lost a son recently, a few minutes ago. Thank you. When the hospital opened, my dear father, who's not a Sai devotee, came, and he had so many distinguished people there, the president and all these other chaps, and I thought, well, there'll be no chance to really see my dad, but he called him in. And my father, who's quite a gregarious gentleman, put his arm around Sai Baba in the interview room and said, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Baba, for taking such good care of my son." Sai Baba turned to him and he said, "Not your son, my son." And that really is how he relates to all of you. You know, it's so extraordinary, this amazing power of love, that it's so exciting. And again, I have to thank you, because I'd forgotten all about this for 3 days. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? You have all, and your energy is so incredible, and as a group so incredible, but it is this energy that we have to individually take out into the world and share with others. So important. Might as well talk about the hospital a little bit. Really exciting. You know, when Sai Baba started his school system some 20 years ago, or 20, 25 years ago, he gave a discourse where he said, this educational system that I'm setting up is going to become a model for India of how through seva, through love, free education can be given, and it will work. It's so exciting when the hospital was being dedicated some 20 years later, and the president was there, and he got up in front of the group, and it was actually commencement ceremonies for the college, university, and he said, "This system that Sai Baba has set up is now a model for India, and I'm going to bring down various dignitaries in the education scene, and we're going to study how this has been done, because it can't be done by anyone else but an avatar, and the avatar within each person." The hospital is a typical example. When he started it and gave his speech and announced, he said, "This hospital will become a model, never seen before, of how love and seva can give first-class medical care to the poor for free." Now, for some reason, he decided to choose me to help him not only in the financing of this hospital, which was a great blessing in itself, but also in the medical planning and the construction, in the design and so forth. He sort of put me out there to do this work, and it was an extraordinary set of circumstances. He sent me to the World Health Organization, which I went to see at his request, Hospital Corporation of America down in Tennessee, which is the most formal and have opened more hospitals worldwide. I went to see all these groups, and when they heard about the project being in Puttaparthi, where that was, that it was going to be free, that they all said, "This is absolutely impossible. This cannot work." The World Health Organization said, "We've been trying to create a model like this forever. We can barely get people just inoculated, much less go into this sort of thing. It will never, never work." And of course, I went back and told Sai Baba that it would never work. He said, "Tigrett, just do your job." You know? We were told by the professionals that it would take at least 2 years, a year to 2 years, to really do the correct medical planning. We did it in 6 weeks. Circumstances just happened, and it happened. We were told it would take at least 2 to 3 years to build it. We built it in 8 months. There were 2,000 workers on the site 24 hours a day, And I'm happy to report, this is so unusual, no one was hurt. And they were working 24 hours a day under arc lights and so forth. And of course that hospital is nothing short of miraculous in itself. It has done now over 1,000 something open heart surgeries free. It is based strictly on service and on love. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable thing. And I'm sure everybody will have a chance to work or help in some way at the hospital. You know, he came out one day, I don't know if you were there, and said, Critchlow was there, he said the hospital is a 1,000-year project. It's quite extraordinary, quite extraordinary. But that hospital is, again, an example of the power of the Avatar and the wonderful things that he can do. He has me doing something. I want to make a comment. I've made a couple of notes about this. You know, I had a miraculous, I don't know if I've told you this, Mike and Bill, wonderful interview with Sai Baba, I guess about 6 months ago. And I just arrived. He called me in immediately, and he said, Tigrett, have you seen the dome? We're getting ready to do something with the dome at the hospital. And he said, you know, there's 9 sides. He said, I'm going to paint a picture, you know, of various gods on each side, you know, Rama and Krishna and so forth. He said, I want to get your photograph because I want to paint you on one of the sides of the building. And I said, Swami, no, please. Please, it's bad enough around here as it is. But please, Swami, no. Why don't you put a picture of one of the gods like Hanuman or whatever? And he looked at me and he said, but Tigrett, you are a god. And to me, that message is the only one I can give to you today that's of any relevance. You have to realize that you're all divine beings. You're not the body, you're not the mind. It's not just an intellectual, spiritual concept. It is reality. The Avatar has told me, for you. You know, it's quite remarkable. And I wanted to comment really on this business of the intercultural thing. This is a multicultural world that we live in. The state of California, in fact, I think it's this year there'll be no majority of any type. And I think by 2010 in America, it will be the same thing here. There have been definitely problems, and it's so great, and if I can direct to my Indian brothers and sisters, I spoke up in Regina, Canada, some months ago, and it was primarily an Indian organization or a group of organizations. There were probably 1,000 people there. It was very exciting, and I met with the kids. And one of the things the kids told me, because they're very forthright, they said, look, we're Canadians, and everybody's trying to make us act like Indians. You know, our parents still want to choose who we're going to marry, and they still are trying to make us, fit us into this cultural mold, but we don't understand it. It's very confusing, and it was amazing. It was, they were very sincere. They were very frustrated, you know, because they were Canadians, and just like the kids that I met with today are Americans. And I think it's very important because Sai comes from this fabulous Indian culture, which is definitely the home of spirituality, if there are countries that have it. But because he comes to this culture, I think every Indian has a responsibility to open up to all the other religions and all the other people in particular. I know it's only natural to hold on to your culture, but you know, this whole thing of being different or being special is so wrong. You know, the fact that we're in a world that tells us that we have power over others if we are different from them. The fact that many people think they possess Sai Baba is a total misnomer. It's so wrong. He possesses you and everything. But the fact that, you know, these kids and the whole thing, I mean, the second that you start putting someone in a mold of being better or having power over others, you know, I'm an American, I'm better than a Mexican. I'm a rich person, I'm better than a poor person. You know, I'm a Hindu, I'm better than a Christian. I mean, it's a cul-de-sac. All is one. All is one. And it's so important for the Sai organization, I think, to spread that message in the way that we act. Sai Baba let me retire, and which was nice for a couple of years. In fact, I had a little daughter who was just born, and I was with her, I guess, about 16 days the first year she was born. I traveled continuously around the planet, in fact, once a month for many, many years, visiting all these locations and carrying on. And my wife was about to leave me, you know, because she never saw me, and it became a very important thing because I was starting this family. Now I've been home for 4 years, and she's about to leave me because I'm in the house too much. You know, so I guess I saw this, and I was up on the veranda about a year or so ago, and I was thinking about it. First of all, I had just had an interview with him where I, through meditation, had reached a point where I felt like I could become a sannyasa and go into a cave, just meditate, do nothing else. I said, you know, I give you my daughter, I give you my, you know, my life and everything else. And he gave me a clue. Then he said, no, I want you in the world, Tigrett. Well, I sat out front, and I was thinking, I was sitting on the veranda, and I was thinking, gosh, you know, love all, serve all was such a neat, perfect expression for my little business in the 70s. I wonder what if I was to go into business. Of course, I'm not going to do that anymore, but if I did, what would be a great expression that I could link up with the business? And I was sitting there like this, and there was a tap on the shoulder, and I looked up, and it was Sai Baba. And he said, Tigrett, help ever, hurt never. I thought, oh my God, he wants me to go back to work. I can't believe it. And then I convinced myself, no, that's probably not correct. And I was up on the veranda a day or two later, and I was thinking again, yeah, but if I did go back to work, what would... And there was another tap on the shoulder. In fact, he'd come out, and he was out in the darshan line. He'd come around the back way, and he tapped me again. He said, Tigrett, help ever, hurt never. So I knew that, in fact, he wanted me back in the world, and that's where I am. I'm now in the process of... And it's been quite amazing because, again, this whole thing of referring to him, the only way I think you can refer to him on the inside is through meditation. Meditation is where all the action is. Just like you have physical exercises for your body, you've got to have spiritual exercises to put you in contact with your true nature. There's this veil between your true personality, your sensation level, and you've got to pierce that veil. The only way you can do that is through meditation. It's taken me now some 20 years of meditating, even get to a point where I can say 2 days out of 5 are pretty good. But it takes that constant work. It's so very important. As part of this, and it's sort of a demonstration, I felt, in fact, this last trip, that it was important in that I was able to see him, to refer everything to him. So I took a stack of papers about this high, and he very patiently for an hour went through every contract and every single thing that I was doing, making every comment, leave this out, take that in, put this, don't do it, these people are no good, that's no good. The whole thing. Many things I did not want to do. Many things I thought weren't correct. Many things I didn't understand, but I did them. It's quite amazing. He has me now in a business called the House of Blues. We just opened in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and this is a celebration of African American culture. The tap root of all popular music is something called the blues. It's folk music that came out of the Delta, our part of the country, and where Bill certainly knows around more about it. It was the only document, really, of the African American experience from the slave days. It sort of congregated around a little town called Clarksdale, Mississippi, back in the 30s. It started to influence contemporary music in the 40s and 50s in Chicago and some of the great artists there. It went on to influence all popular music, rock and roll, and all that sort of thing. So I asked Swami, did he want me, in fact, to do this and get involved in demonstrating this culture? And he said, yes, very much so. So I am now walking a tightrope that only a white liberal from Jackson, Tennessee could do, because it is all about harmony, racial harmony. The very sort of left-wing aspect of the civil rights movement are very angry at me because I think I'm ripping off African-American culture. And the very conservative wing in sort of the white communities are very angry at me for being involved with it in the first place. And it's just been marvelous. You know, everything is a balance between heart and mind. I think the most important thing that Swami has taught me is through meditation how to try to, and we may go through an exercise if you'd like to in a minute that he gave me to do. But this whole House of Blues thing has exploded into a pretty wild thing. Swami said he would bring great partners for me. This is a multi-million-dollar operation that's going to many cities around the world, and this week the final papers will be signed. Harvard University is backing the House of Blues. They're in the blues bar business now. It's quite extraordinary, and he said there'll be great partners, and there they are. He had me set up a foundation, which he has said is equally important, and it's something called the House of Blues International Foundation, where we teach, we've created a curriculum. The House of Blues is now a schoolroom 3 days a week. We have classes from Medford, Roxbury, these are sections around Boston, the Boston area come in where we teach them about civil rights. Most black or white American kids have studied. I mean, if you know, the school system in America has sort of collapsed. There's no music, there's no art. They're struggling to just get kids' attention. And I thought, well, I know what gets their attention. It's music. And if we can use music to teach racial harmony and to teach some of the history of the African American culture, perhaps we can create this harmony through education, which I think is correct. Swami has pushed me into it more and more. The foundation has now become truly a divine and divinely inspired thing, in the sense that for the first time in the history of education, sitting on the board of this public foundation is Harvard University, the Du Bois Institute at Harvard, the Educational School at Harvard, MIT, the Berkeley School of Music, the Anti-Defamation League. The governor has sent down can you believe Swami putting together all these people? The governor sent down a representative who actually sits on his cabinet at the State House. The Secretary of Education has sent someone to sit on our board as well, plus the head of the school systems in Boston, the multi-curriculum chiefs out of Region Latin, which is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and many others. But again, the key to the success of my life goes right back to love all, serve all, help ever, hurt never. I mean, it is so extraordinary to see Swami at work. I am, an oddity. I mean, Swami has said he's using some of the oddest people, unlikely people to deliver his message. But I think, again, this amazing group here has such a responsibility, first, to accept one another, and then use those wonderful expressions to go out into the world and be that beacon of light for his work. So exciting. I'd like to end, if I could. First, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask, just in case? Yes, ma'am, at the back there. Oh, sir.
Sir, I would like to know how exactly you do your meditation, if you don't mind telling it, and what were your experiences during the meditation when it reached its culmination?
About 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, when I retired, Sai Baba told me to move to California and told me to work with a lady named Phyllis Crystal. Phyllis has written several books on meditation and various techniques. I find them to be absolutely incredible symbols. Swami has blessed me with, and I know some of you have seen this tape, he asked me to speak about metaphysical things at a conference up in New York State. I did so and went back, and he was very pleased, but he said not to speak about those matters again. It would confuse people a little bit too much. But all I can tell you is that I've had experiences that have been interdimensional. And the exciting thing is that Sai Baba is not, that's just a projection of God. That's just the tip of the iceberg. He's working on so many different levels simultaneously to the little character that we all know and love who's down in India. But that that is not the totality of what Sai Baba is all about. You know, that's our friend and that's our comforter, but he is working in so many dynamic ways. And although I'd love to go into detail about it, I can just tell you that from my experiences, it's been so wonderful for me to even stand here and report to you that he is working on many levels simultaneously. The techniques that I use primarily are a couple of things. One is one that, to me, is one of the most important things. Every morning when I get up, I go into meditation and I ask Sai Baba to think through me, to feel through me, to speak through me, to act through me, and to love through me. Again, this whole thing about heart and mind, balancing your heart with your mind. Think about it. If you're all mental and you don't have the sensitivity to balance it with, you can go out and waste a lot of time. If you're all emotional and you don't have the balance mentally, then you're going to waste more time as well. So balancing heart and mind is one of the most important things. Lord, please think through me. Please feel through me. And then there's the expression that comes through that balance. Speak through me. Act through me. Love through me. So this has been one of the, and again, I think it's all so really simple. I don't think there's anything complicated about Sai Baba or his message or metaphysics or anything. It all seems very simple to me. This is a very simple exercise which anyone can do. One of the meditations that for balancing heart and mind is one that I also do every day, which is called a tree meditation. And again, if you refer to Mrs. Crystal's books, they have been blessed by Swami, and I think that they're really, in my opinion, which I'm not supposed to talk too much about, I don't want to get in trouble with Mr. Goldstein. But, yes, sir. That's right. Sorry, Swami. Yes, I know. We've had such a great fun together. It just so happens that Dr. Goldstein and I have been blessed to have many interviews together. And I can tell you that Sai Baba probably has more fun kidding Mike Goldstein about one thing or another than anything I've ever seen. In fact, Sai Baba, if he was not a God man, would be a stand-up comedian because he is absolutely hilarious. He's absolutely hilarious all the time. But meditation, and I think you'll find many of the symbols, I think those symbols are created by Sai Baba. They're great tools. And if you read the book and if you're into meditation, using those symbols, I think, can guide you and help you a great deal. Yes, ma'am.
Isaac, this morning you were talking with the kids, and you were telling them, if you'd like to share that again with us, about how the eating and the Swami feeding you and the diet. Would you share that with us this morning? They loved it. The kids
Oh, goodness.
About it.
Yeah, well, Dr. Goldstein and I share a similar problem, and that's that we love great things to eat. And we both have put on about 40 pounds, I can say that. And I've been going on a diet. I was in Cody Canal 4 weeks ago, and I was blessed that Sai Baba invited me in and served me both lunch and dinner in his house. And I told him, I said, Swami, I'm on a diet. I'm trying to look at me. I'm trying to lose weight. He stood over me and made me eat 3 portions of food on both occasions. So I don't know if that means I'm supposed to lose weight because I'm eating too much, or whether I should gain weight because he'd like for me to. Who knows? Any other questions?
Yeah. How do you handle the separation from him? If you're so loving like a mother, you go so often to India and you come back, do you feel a lot of separation anxiety from Baba?
Well, that's very interesting. This whole business of an interview or being next to him, I think it's irrelevant. I mean, I've been 15 years without an interview. I have a relationship with him then. I've now been doing this physical work that he wants me to do. If I go to India next week, or 3 weeks from now, which I'm going to go, I will not go thinking about getting an interview. If he needs me for something, then I will respond. I know that may be hard for some of you to imagine, but that's really what's so important about it. I love being with him. I love seeing him in the form. It's very confusing to many people. I think that people who love and adore Baba, when they go there, it becomes a very confusing thing for them, because they go, well, I love this master, this God man, but why is he talking to me? Or was that look me he didn't approve? Or they get into all these gyrations over this little form. So I think it's a very, very difficult thing, the concept of omniscience and then the little form that's down there. It can be confusing to a lot of people. I think it is. But as he has said several times, I have to break you to remake you. And I think that's what he does. I think he has to put us in the fire, and God knows with his hospital project and being around Goldstein, he's got us in the fire all the time, and the firing line. I mean, Sai Baba has yelled at Michael Goldstein and me. It is not a pleasant experience. I can assure you of that. I mean, really yelled. And he's taking me in. He took me, in fact, after this one time, I was up in my room crying for 3 days. And then I think it was Colonel Jogarao sent a message to me, Swami doesn't want you to work on the hospital project anymore. You can go now. And I said, no way. If he wants me to go, he can tell me himself. I'm not going to listen to what you've got to say. And that's what the relationship is with Sai Baba. It's one-on-one. It's not through someone else, or it's a personal relationship, with each individual. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The work that you and Phyllis Crystal, I won't go into this too deeply, but the work that you all did, there were notes made. Will there be a book coming out about that?
Well, it's been very interesting. Sai Baba asked us to tape these experiences. There's about 400 hours on tape right now, and I asked him not long ago, should we transcribe the tapes? He said, no, I'll tell you when, so
But
who knows?
maybe later.
Maybe later, who knows? It's all up to him.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. I think he's here now. As you know, he over the years has told everybody, I'm there, I'm going to be there, and I think he is. Yes, sir. I think that's a very, very important cleansing exercise. That's taking the light into the body, around all the aspects of the body, and cleansing. As you know, in fact, even in our contemporary society, there's a best-selling book that Bill Moyers just did, all about mind over the body. Very, very important book, which even for a novice lets you know the power of the mind. Sai Baba made me this funny little watch. In fact, this first watch, this one, is a very, very expensive watch, very fashionable. He took one look at it, he said, out of fashion, very cheap, no good, not real. Okay. And then he made this watch, which he said pure gold. Okay? This watch has a Japanese name. It says made in Switzerland on the front, and it says made in India on the back. He said this was in fashion, so. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir.
Has Swami ever expressed any thoughts about businesses moving to Puttaparthi or that area?
I think he has, it's just like many devotees that go there. The energy is so powerful. I myself can't stay more than a week or two. He has allowed some devotees to go and stay longer for whatever reason only known to him. He does not like devotees going down there and spending long periods of time. Again, he wants you in the world. That's where you're going to pay your karmic debts. I know of no business down there, and except for one or two sort of local guys with his permission, I would never even dream of starting a business down that way. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Recently, at Cody, I think you had just left, but the Supreme Court, ex-Supreme Court justice came, and he told a story about how Swami told him one thing in darshan about an operation for his wife, and told his wife totally opposite. And Swami was just laughing as he was telling his story. Have you had any experiences where maybe with you and Michael or on the hospital committee and everything, where he would tell one of you one thing and one of someone else something else, just to stir it up to get your egos and things?
Well, that is most definitely, I think, how he uses some of these people. He has told me that I make a lot of people jealous. My mind doesn't think in terms of jealousy, but I can imagine, the fact that someone's getting attention. I think that we've all been through this when we're down there. There's that guy over there in line. I don't like him. There's something about his look. Swami may be paying too much attention to him, not enough to me. I mean, there's all this ego thing, and I think that the people that he does bring forward and really stir up a lot of other people. He put me against the entire Indian organization to build this hospital. I mean, blessed, wonderful Karma Yogi Jogarao had built every single building for Swami for the last 15 years, and he said, no, Tigrett's going to handle this. And Michael knows the difficulties that we had. I think he did that just to break down some egos and, again, this feeling of possession. He belongs to us or our group or our culture and all this thing. I think he just used that, just as he's used me as a guy in rock and roll, suddenly to bring in the forefront of his organization in whatever manner, just to let people know God is everywhere. I'm using everyone. So it's there's been some very, very interesting experiences. I mean, he even is being around him in the closer range physically. It's like a medieval king and his court. Really, everybody will do anything to get close to him, And it's a pretty dangerous bunch. They'll fight it out there, as you know. It's funny because Sai Baba called me in one day and he said, talking about the Indian organization, he said, Tigrett, did you tell so-and-so such and such? I said, no, Swami. He said, well, they said you did. They've been telling everyone. Did you do so-and-so? Did you do that? I said, no, Swami. He said, well, such and such said that you did all that. I said, Swami, these are the leaders of your organization. They're making up all these fibs. He said, what can I do? That's what he said. What can I do? Again, this is something I think they must go through. They are learning. He uses us all, like grinding rocks together to shake off all the dirt and all the karma and all that sort of thing. And he gives you, it's really like having your feet in the fire, He's a great taskmaster, a great disciplinarian, and I'm in love with him. Yes, ma'am. I will sing one little song he asked me to sing, yes, which I don't have a very good voice. Yes, sir.
When you had first had your interview with Baba, did you have anything that was deeply striking within him, which struck you immediately? Could you share with us that experience? The first time when he met you and spoke to you in a special interview, what was it that struck you?
Well, I think that, each of us are on exactly the same path. We're just on a different part of the path, and we each have a, sort of a reaction to him, or some people get very upset by him. Some people get very confused. Some people fall madly in love the second that they see him. I think it's different for everybody, but those are human reactions. I think that there is a spiritual bonding that occurs that's beyond any of those type of emotional reactions. That the fact that we are so blessed to be, as Bill said, I think early, to be walking the planet at the time that the avatar is, a Purna avatar at that. And the fact that for whatever karmic luck, a handful of us have been brought to him, for whatever grace that we have earned from a previous life or previous actions. I mean, he has said in many of his works, when I come, and of course he's come in many forms over many centuries, I come when the world is losing the path of Dharma. I mean, look at the world today. This is the most important moment for the avatar to arrive. And I think just his vibration in this dimension is a cleansing thing that puts everybody back on the path. Look at the life of Jesus. He was in the world just a few years, or Buddha, or Krishna. Of course, Krishna and Rama led pretty long lives. In fact, Sai Baba has actually sat down and told us in detail about the life of Krishna and Rama at times. But It's that vibration that's important. That's the whole thing. That's why he's treating everyone equally. It's that vibration. It has nothing to do with this personality business. But with me, it was just a slow, strong bonding of which there's no retreating from. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Isaac, very first time when I heard about you is through an article. It's called Isaac Hard Rock. And two words caught my attention, which was dharmic management. In today's business world, where they're so much focusing on profit maximizing, have you been able to inspire anybody to bring that dharmic management into their business?
Well, yeah, most definitely. You know, it's all a matter about your responsibility. Many of you have businesses of your own. Some of you have workmates. Some of you may be even employers. It is your duty, and if any of you have experimented with the teachings of Sai Baba in your workplace, you can see the changes and the doors that it opens and the barriers that it breaks down and so forth. I mean, these words have power behind them. Satya, Dharma, all of those things can be put into your business. I made a real personal effort in mine, and I knew that I had a responsibility, especially to so many young people working for me, and that in many cases it was their first job, and I had a duty to give them a work ethic. I have a duty to give them discipline. I had a duty to give them something to take with them, because this job was just a stepping stone to another place for them. And I knew that one day they too might have this responsibility that I had of being empowered over others, and that they would take these lessons with them. So it became very important for me. I mean, I used to get up and speak. This was the subject of my speech every week for 15 years. And I would get up and almost give the same speech every week, but I knew that that was my duty. They knew, because it came from the top. It wasn't just a principle that, if you do this, you'll make a lot of money. It creates harmony in the workspace. It has to come from the heart. If it comes from the heart, it filters through everyone, that vibration. So yes, it can be done. A chap, in fact, named Jack Hawley, who you all may know, has just written a book called Dharma Management, which Sai Baba has blessed, which is about putting spiritual principles into the workplace. But it's absolutely an obligation that all of you have if you work, whether you work for someone else or they work for you. It's responsibility. It's so important. Work is worship. Reawakening the spirit in work. And of course he's using Mr. Hawley, who is a professional who actually teaches this to managers and so forth. He's using him in his experience, and as he's using all of us. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Isaac, you mentioned some very traumatic experiences you had early on in your life, and I'm just wondering, and you're also mentioning that you're doing some psychological work with Phyllis Crystal, and so my wonder is how does this kind of thing, working through traumas or psychological difficulties or some kind of inner work, how do you reconcile that with Sai Baba's teachings and the whole spiritual path? I mean, Western psychologists are saying you have to work through your traumas and get in touch with relive your traumas and that kind of thing. And where does this?
Well, I personally believe that this work, which Sai has talked to me about in great detail over the last number of years, is a tool that he has given, sort of a modern spiritual therapy, if you will, because the result is fantastic. If you use these meditations, it can purify traumas, it can get you over difficult relationships, it can protect you from mental and physical abuse. If you read these texts and are suffering from any of these type of maladies, I beseech you all to experiment, if you will, with these techniques. The only reason that I continue with this work, besides the fact that Sai told me to do it, is the miraculous results I've seen through these meditation techniques. So I find them to be very spiritually based, not psychologically based at all. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a technical question. I feel Swami's presence all the time, feel joy, exercise, or is there, I just was thinking about that when you were talking about that. Is there a technique, or is there something to get Swami's guidance related to practical daily issues?
Well, I think it's riddled throughout his own life. You know, as he says, his life is his message. And you know, as far as techniques and that sort of thing, the only thing I can tell you is about these books that I've been involved with Mrs. Crystal. I believe in them, and I believe in the success that it gives people who practice these meditations.
I've been greatly blessed inwardly, and I've sat for many, many hours waiting to hear guidance, and I don't get it.
Keep sitting.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I waited for 15 years for an interview. You know, it's inherent. It comes when it's supposed to. You know.
Okay. All right.
Really, we're all on a path. It's many lifetimes to go.
Yeah, thanks.
She has 2 books and a third one called Cutting the Ties That Bind, and more Cutting the Ties That Bind. And Swami's had to do a new book, which will be out in the spring, I think. Yes, I think so. Cutting the Ties That Bind. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, if everyone would please ask their questions on the microphone so that the people in the tents will be able to hear what the questions are. Thank you.
We know you're out there, by the way. Yes.
I want to ask you, could you tell us how Baba wants you to understand about these unnatural deaths in your family?
Well, again, you know,
Accidents, unnatural deaths, and not in
how to understand them?
by age and death, by age and disease, the natural deaths. I'm talking about the unexpected unnatural deaths in your family.
Well, these are great traumas. I'm sure there are many people sitting in this room who have lost someone they love.
What do you understand from that? Does he say anything, any connection to like past lives or karma?
Oh, well, again, the message that I got, having been confused by all these things and feeling scarred by them and feeling like I've been cursed by them and feel like, why me? And I've had all this torment. When I asked him about it, he basically said, to bless you, to prepare you. You know, and so it was quite an amazing thing for me because the scars emotionally that one carries from these experiences, which many of you are carrying, stay with you far beyond the actual experience. And what happened for me when he said that to me, to soften your heart, that's when I truly, in my being, realized that this was not a curse. This was a blessing, truly a blessing. And I think that's what if we're true devotees, we must understand this about our lives. He is speeding up, I think, our karma, all these devotees he's brought to them. And that means it's not going to be easy. It can be very, very difficult.
The reason I asked, a lot of mothers, ask me when their small children die because of some accidents or some, problems, how to understand and what is Baba's, teaching for them to deal with it.
Well, I think in the Vedas, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. I've studied them. And I forget which rishi spoke of this, but in the ancient beginnings of the Hindu faith, people believe, and of course Baba has told us, that our breath is a mantra. And I forget again which rishi it was, said, your clock in life is breath. You're given a certain number of breaths. And then when you breathe that last one, whatever the circumstances, your time in this body is over with. I mean, if I get any bigger, I'm ready to go now. I'll tell you that right now. Any other questions?
Right here in this corner.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you would like to share with us your experience. I think it was in Jai Thomas's book about you met this lady somewhere in London and you took her to India and you've never seen her since.
Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious. Well, that's quite an extraordinary story. It's sort of a long one. I'll try to keep it short. There's a very famous heroin den that all us rock and rollers used to hang out with in London. And I was about to go off to see Sai Baba, and for the life of me, something was forcing me to go to this place at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I went in, and didn't even know why I was there, because it's happened to me a couple of times, and I'm sure with some of you. I didn't know why I was there, but I just had to be. I walked down this little aisle, and there was a little blonde head leaning over a table, snorting some drugs. And I passed by, and I turned around, something grabbed me on the shoulders, and I went up to her, and she didn't even raise her head. I said, "Look, I'm going to India tomorrow. If you'd like to come, meet me in front of the Hard Rock Cafe at 10 o'clock, which just came out of my mouth. I didn't think, I guess this is so weird. I'm going home. I left, went home. Next day, I'm leaving the Hard Rock to get into my limo to go to the airport, and here's this little girl standing out in front with a suitcase. So I said, well, come on, let's go. And we all got in the car, and off we went. We went off to India. I won't mention her name, actually. It turned out that when we got on this plane, she told me that she was a prostitute, that she was a heroin addict, that she had many deep psychological problems. And the first was about to start with me because she had no drugs. I went through about 2 weeks in India. I did not take her to the ashram. Just helping her get through a very traumatic, physical experience that she went coming down from heroin. And it was very funny because I sort of took her to all these nice hotels, and it was really impressed her that it was like something that she thought was so important in her life. And then after 2 weeks, I said, well, tomorrow we're going to go down and visit a friend of mine down in Puttaparthi, and we went down there. It was Shivaratri, 1976. I have never seen Sai Baba pay more attention to anyone than he did with this girl. He would come out every night. He would part the ladies. She always sat at the back. She felt ashamed to be there. She felt all these traumas going on. He would make her come forward. He would make vibhuti for her. He used to walk around the ashram quite a lot in those days because they were building so many things. On several occasions, she would come around a corner and fall into his arms. When the Shivaratri ceremony actually happened, he produced this lingam, and he walks through the aisles there in the Punachandra, and this girl was sitting on the girls' section there, and he walked right up to her and held this thing in front of her like this for about 30, 45 seconds. He then walked on, and she went into some sort of, I don't know, she was speaking in various languages. She was writhing on the floor. The ladies took her out and took her outside, and she went, we rushed around to see what was wrong. I heard her speaking forms of Greek, Latin. I don't know what was happening to her, but she was obviously, from looking at that lingam, something had sparked her and a cleansing was going on. She was literally writhing on the ground there for about 45 minutes. She thought she finally came to, thought she had just fainted, and said, I've got to go back in and sing the songs, and rushed back in, sat on the front row, and was there for the 24-hour period. I never saw her again. She left the next day. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
I guess I have two parts to my question. 8 years ago, I had this book, Cutting the Ties That Bind, and I really liked it. Gave it to quite a few friends because it really helps me when I have inharmony with someone else and can disconnect the inharmony and find peace. But there's two parts. One part is, was that a book blessed by Baba?
Yes.
And the other one is, I was passing out a lot of those books, and I was told couldn't get any more, that it was out of print.
Yes.
Will it be put back in print? Because I really like that book.
It's Mrs. Crystal has just changed her publisher, which was a European publisher, and I think it's, I forget the name of the publisher. Wise, I think, is the name of the company that's putting them out. Yeah, Wiser, that's it. One more question from anyone? From the back. Yes, sir.
Thanks. I was wondering, I realize you've had a lot of contact with the rock stars in rock music industry and the people involved with that. And in connection with that and Sai, I'm wondering, do you think that, isn't there like a tremendous potential there of using the people various rock stars who may be more receptive than others to affect more change and make a difference in the world as instruments for Baba, as you've been used.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a pretty strong opinion about that. I think that, obviously it's his plan and it's the way he's doing it. And we'd all like for everybody in the whole world to know that he exists all at once. But he, as he said himself many times, is, I'd never be able to walk among you again. If somebody came out that everyone respected and said, God, that's him, everybody go there, none of us would be able to come within miles and miles of Sai Baba. The fact that he is controlled and does control everything. And even at this point, and I've watched the ashram grow to now it's full just about all the time. I think it's a blessing, and it's so amazing the way that he's handled it, because he's still available to so many of us and can be continuously. So, yeah, I think that maybe a rock star will jump on bandwagon or something like that. In fact, I took a picture. Dan Aykroyd, who's one of our partners in the House of Blues, his wife, who's lovely, Donna Dixon, gave me a picture to take down for a blessing for Sai Baba, and he looked at the picture and he said, "Woman, very spiritual." Looked at it and said, "Man, not spiritual at all." I went back and told Aykroyd that. He said, "Well, I believe in UFOs." So everybody in their own time, Okay, one more. The lady with the Hard Rock Cafe T-shirt on. Thank you. I'd help pay for Swami's hospital.
You mentioned earlier that when your brother died and your parents separated, that you prayed a lot. How did you feel the very first time that you heard about Baba in terms of, just in terms of as an avatar, and how did you feel just when you heard about him, and what did you think of him when you first heard?
Well, it's such a new concept. The whole idea, I'd never heard the word avatar before. The whole idea of God on earth. Can you imagine being in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago and coming home and telling your family, "Hey, you're not going to believe who I just met." It's a very difficult concept. And again, I think that we're again all on this path. I feel blessed that I have been saved from degradation and sin and many other things that I had a great deal of opportunity to fall victim to. Again, the attention I think that Swami has given me is not important whatsoever, because I think he treats everyone equally. This physical business is something entirely different. It's the vibration that you go there for. I can't really tell you anything more beyond the fact that it's this divine love that changed it for me. Human love is so contracting, it's so grasping, it's so limited, where divine love is this expanding thing. And I think that when we've all, look at us here together as a group, we're here because we've all experienced that same thing. It's all touched our hearts, and that's why we're here. So it's exciting process, but it's a difficult one. It's love. Love is everything. In fact, I'd like to end by, Swami told me to sing, which I can't do. I've done it a couple of times, and I'm going to sing a little song that I heard my first visit to the ashram by a devotee. So bear with me if it's off key. Oh, make me like you. Please make me like you. You are a servant, make me one too. Oh Lord, I am willing, please do what you must do to make me like you, Lord, make me like you. Sairam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Isaac Tigrett. He has not only given to the American Hard Rock Cafe, but he has given the message of Swami to the Hard Rock Cafe. Love all, serve all, to the millions of people. And today, such an inspiring talk to the devotees here in North and South Central region. And on behalf of them, I request you, this is not the first one and not the last one. Once again, let's thank him. The next part,